Hi there Star Wars collectors, welcome to another Bossk's Bounty video and welcome to episode 23 of Asks Bossk's Bounty. That is right, it is Sunday and it is time for the Q&A on my channel. As you all already know, this is the series where you guys ask me questions in the comment section below and then I try and answer them on the following week's episode. So if you do have a question for next week's episode, be sure to drop it in the comment section below and of course I'll do my best to answer it. Now, before we go on, if you like this video, don't forget to drop a like down below because that really does help the video and the channel. And of course, if you are new to the channel, join the community and hit that subscribe button. Now, before we do get on to this week's questions, I did want to sort of address the news that came out this week regarding the two new card backs for Commander Wolffe and the Power Droid. So, really happy with both of them. Apparently, they are mock-ups because if you look at the bubbles there, I'll just throw some images up so you can see. If you look at the bubbles there, the figures are kind of floating in there, and the Power Droid's probably even the wrong way round. He'll probably be on his side when he actually does come out. But I think that the card backs are true to what they're going to be. I think they are the actual official images. Commander Wolffe, I'm really happy with. You can see him there with his helmet off, and the head sculpt is going to look just like that image. So really pleased with that one. Can't wait for that one. As for the Power Droid, obviously, I'm ecstatic that they've chosen to use the original vintage card back from back in the day. Of course, this is the vintage collection, so that is kind of what it's all about. You can see those two especially there. Those are the card backs from back in the day, and that is what the vintage collection is all about. So I did mention on my Instagram that people are kind of getting a little bit confused and they're almost annoyed and complaining that the figure doesn't match the card back. Well, you know, this is the Gonk Droid or the Power Droid from back in the late 70s, early 80s, and he came out on that card back, and as you can see he looks nothing like the one that is on that card back, and that's because this one is based on the Power Droid that's walking around Luke's homestead when Aunt Beru calls up to him from down in that little hole sort of thing. The one on the card back is more based around a GNK or Gonk Droid, as it were. Probably a bit more like that, I would say, but obviously in grey detail. There was one of those in The Mandalorian if you've seen that TV show. But the figure that we're getting, if you look closely at the one that is in Luke's homestead, it is definitely more like this one here, and I'm really happy about that. Alright then guys, so on to the first question of the week. Universal Collector says, great video, what's your favourite 3.75 inch figure from the Solo A Star Wars Story? Mine's Key Tolsite. That one is a top figure, I must admit, from the 5POA line. But if I'm going to pick a figure from the Solo A Star Wars Story figures, I would have to go with the Mimbam Trooper in the vintage collection. That's a great figure, great sculpt, great articulation, great detailing and everything on it. I can't fault that figure at all. And if I was going to pick another one, maybe from the 5POA line, I think the Han Solo in Mud Trooper uniform, that's a decent figure, and I'd love to see that in the vintage collection as well. Commander Fox CC1010 says, hey Bossk, what is your favourite Imperial figure or vehicle from any Star Wars line? So there's so many figures that I could choose from in terms of Imperial figures. There's just like, I mean, you could count Stormtroopers, Snow Troopers from the original line, but I'm going to pick one from a modern line that I think they have done absolutely perfect, and it is this 6-inch General Veers from the Black Series. So this figure here is phenomenal. The facial sculpt there of the actor is perfect. He has the officer's uniform underneath, but then also you can put his sort of like battle armor as well and the helmet on to make him look like the ATAC commander, General Veers. Absolutely stunning figure. Really pleased when this one came out, and I'm sure it's a fan's favorite. Ryan Supernova says, what is your favourite figure version of Obi-Wan Kenobi and what is your least favourite? So we've got quite a few questions about what my favourite figures are in different lines and everything, and that is cool. I love talking about this sort of stuff. Obi-Wan Kenobi, I actually think that this one from the recent 5POA line, dare I say it, is a great Obi-Wan Kenobi. When I think of Obi-Wan Kenobi, I kind of always think of the vintage, old man Ben Kenobi. Such a great character in the original films, and this figure of him is really good. The head sculpt is perfect, and if they could do something like this in the vintage collection with a bit more articulation, maybe a soft goods cape, but I kind of think that this plastic cape really sits well with the figure. I think sometimes when you have a cloth cape, it can look too big and baggy, so they'd have to sort that out. But if they use that head, that'd be a great figure. In terms of ones that I don't like, there's a few from the Phantom Menace and stuff like that. I can't pick one out right now, but I think some of the Ewan McGregor head sculpts are questionable at best. Eric Sorensen says, great video, really loving these. So thank you for that, Eric. I do appreciate it, my friend. My question for you is, which figure vehicle do you love that seems to be generally hated, disliked by most collectors? Again, that's a difficult question because there's just been so much over the years. Star Wars collectors like to complain about stuff quite a lot, but if I'm thinking of something quite recent that I actually do love and I love the look of and I think looks great, it's this. And it is the most recent vintage collection vehicle. It is the Troop Transport, and I got a lot of negative feedback about this vehicle. People saying it's out of scale, and of course it's out of scale. A lot of vehicles are out of scale, and X-Wing's out of scale, isn't it? But you know, it is what it is, and I still think it's great. Question from my buddy Mark on Twitter, and he goes by the handle of Chocolate Chip Wookie. So if you want to follow someone on Twitter that has got an extensive vintage collection of Star Wars figures, vehicles and figures and what have you, extremely knowledgeable person, then he is the man to follow. He asks, what's your favourite vintage Kenner stroke Palatoy figure and vehicle stroke playset in your collection? I'm going to be quite obvious really, aren't I? Really, I mean, obviously my favourite figure is Bossk. He's what I've kind of put my whole channel around. He was the baddie that I always used to play with when I was a kid, and thus he is now and always has been kind of my favourite. Of course, you've also got amazing figures like Bespin Luke Skywalker, extremely nice figure. Luke Jedi's a great figure as well, and a Gonk Droid as well. I do love the Power Droid. In terms of playset or vehicle, of course it's too big to get in shot right now, but it is my vintage Millennium Falcon. I'm sure everyone knows that I've gone down in saying that it is the greatest toy that was ever made. It's almost indestructible. If you think about the amount of Millennium Falcons that are still around to this day in perfect condition. I mean, mine got beat up, smashed against the wall, played with to death, and it's still, there's not one broken piece on it basically. It's still in perfect nick, which is great. So, and it's what, nearly 40 years old. In terms of a playset that I want to own, that is most definitely the grey X-Wing in Return of the Jedi box. That's another one that I had as a kid on one of my birthdays, and I would really want a nice version or example of that in great condition with all the battle damage on it. I don't really care whether the stickers are on it or not, but I just want one of those in a nice box to put on display. JP Fan says, hey Bossk, I love your vids. Thank you very much, JP Fan. I do appreciate that. What is your favourite 3.75 inch Stormtrooper figure? So if we're talking about figures, not what is my favourite type of Stormtrooper, then it has to be the most recent Rogue One Stormtrooper. This is currently the definitive Stormtrooper. You can't get much better than that. It is like just holding a mini Stormtrooper in your hand. They have absolutely nailed that one completely, and I need more of them really. Lucky Golden Rock Studios says, great video Bossk Bounty. I have a question. What is your top 5 Clone Wars figures you hope for the vintage collection? So that's actually quite an easy answer for me. After watching Series 7 of the Clone Wars, that is currently on Disney Plus at the moment, I 100% want the Bad Batch on vintage card. I think they would look phenomenal. I think Hasbro could do a great job in making those figures. And if I was going to pick another one that's not in the Bad Batch, then we're getting 5. So that's definitely a figure that I've always wanted on the vintage card. So that would be a good one. And of course, Captain Rex. We need a Captain Rex. 1980s and Star Wars Guy says, was there a figure you had from any line that you were embarrassed to have or just didn't show your friends? Not really, no. I think I like all my figures. I don't tend to buy figures that I do not like. I think if I was to have a figure that I'd be embarrassed about and I wouldn't really want on show, it'd be Holdo. I think it's not a great looking character. She looks more like something out of the Hunger Games rather than Star Wars. And I didn't like the Black Series figure either, so I didn't buy it. Rich Goosen says, hi Bossk, great video as ever. Thank you very much, Rich. My question is, which figure would you most like to see redone with the new face print tech in the vintage collection? So that one, I would have to go with this, the Rebel Fleet Trooper. I think this is a great figure. It could possibly do with a bit more articulation on its hips, but then again, I'm not really too bothered about hip articulation. I don't mind the swivel hips particularly. I think on characters like this with sort of cargo trousers and things like that, it looks right, rather than the Luke Bespin figure, which he looks like he's got these huge hips. So I kind of prefer that sometimes. But I think if you were to do new face deco on this guy, or even a different head, so it's a bit more closer to the actor, a bit like the one they did for the Black Series, then I think that would be very nice indeed. Arif Amzi says, hey boss, do you know when the Fives figure is going to be officially announced? I don't know when it is officially, mate. I just know it's coming because obviously Amazon told everyone that it was coming. I think we're just going to have to wait. I don't think it'll be too much longer. Obviously everyone's in lockdown. Hasbro aren't doing their conventions, so they're going to have to show everyone the reveals that they were going to be revealing at those conventions. So maybe at the same time as one of those conventions was due to be out, we'll get some more figures, but I don't think it'll be too much longer, to be honest. I mean, the figures are due out in October, somewhere around then, so it can't be too much longer before we see that figure. Big Bosky, great name, says, great video, boss. Do you think they are going to make a Bossk Vintage Collection figure? I don't think they will, purely because we had one in the Vintage Saga collection in 2006, was it? It says 2007 on there, so 2006, 2007. This essentially is, even though it hasn't got a number, these are pretty much the Vintage Collection, right? I mean, people tend to associate these as being the start of the Vintage Collection, along with the Vintage Trilogy Collection. And this figure here is that figure there, and to be honest, you cannot get a better Bossk than that. That is the best Bossk figure currently in 3.75. I mean, just look at him in that bubble. And of course, this is the vintage card back from back in the day, so you cannot really expand on that too much. And yeah, I just think it'd be a good repack. He's an expensive one on the secondary market these days, so they could just re-release that one, and I don't think anyone would have any complaints whatsoever. Doug Noth says, hey Bossk, thanks for keeping us entertained in dire times. Well, I appreciate that, Doug. To be honest, making these videos helps me out as well, so it's a win-win situation for all of us. But yeah, I do like making these videos, and I do like you guys responding in the comments section below. I love the whole community and everything. I think it's great, especially, as you say, in these dire times. But you ask, what do you think qualifies a figure as a smart repack? So obviously, with the Vintage Collection at the moment, we have got figures coming out, and then we have repack waves. Now, I don't think those repack waves are classed as smart repacks. I think they are just a wave of repacks that Hasbro want to get out there to try and get people back in to the line, essentially, new people into the line. Some of those figures are hard to get on the secondary market. They're quite expensive. So those repacks are good repacks. In terms of a smart repack, I think there's a subtle difference between a repack wave and then a smart repack, which is maybe a figure that's just included in another wave. And I think if we look at the Rebel Fleet Trooper again, I think this one here would be a great example of a smart repack. So this one is quite expensive on the secondary market. You're going to be paying maybe £30-40, maybe $40 possibly for this figure. But it's good enough just to be straight repacked, obviously with the photoreal technology, you know. And it's an army building figure as well. So this one would go down very, very well with collectors, in my opinion. Certainly go down well with me because I don't own that figure loose. So I'd probably want 3 or 4 of them in my collection, loose figures, and then obviously keep one carded. So I think this sort of thing constitutes as a smart repack that would be happily put into any of the other waves. So if you had like 3 new figures and 1 repack, I think that's a great example. David Sutherland says, what Star Wars figures will you be buying in store after quarantine? So after quarantine, I would love to be able to go to a shop that sells Star Wars figures. Unfortunately, that probably isn't possible in the UK. We don't really have shops, or certainly not near me, that sell Star Wars figures. But I will be buying whichever Vintage Collection figures are available to buy at the particular time. So by the time we get out of quarantine, I do not know when that's going to be. But yeah, the next wave of Vintage Collection figures for sure. Okay then guys, that's it for this week. That is another episode of Ask Bossk's Bounty. It's been episode 23. Can you believe it? 23 of these that I've done, but I'm loving doing them. So if you enjoy them too, make sure you drop a like down below and make sure you leave a question in the comment section below for next week's episode. And we shall see you on the next one.